This video is intended to give some advice for people traveling to Ethiopia. Travel advice on potential concerns, things to watch out for. Hopefully it will help you to have a safer trip and also give you some pointers on positives as well. So recently spent 4 months in Ethiopia. Mainly in the capital Addis Ababa, but also in the south in Awassa. I went to work with an aid agency there as a volunteer, so not predominantly tourism. However, I also spent some time backpacking and traveling around, and there are a couple of things that I want to keep you informed about, or to advise you about. I guess really the first one is Addis Ababa. So if we look at the capital, the first thing to know is that transportation can be very expensive. The main means of transportation in the city of Addis Ababa are shared minibuses, which are called taxis, but are in fact small blue and white minibuses. A minibus can be occupied by up to 20 people at any time. So one of the first things to think about when you travel by minibus is keep your belongings safely with you. When we were there, we had 2 telephones stolen from the handbag of the person I was with, which is very unfortunate, because dealing with the police then subsequently can be a real headache, especially if you're not with an Ethiopian. So keep your belongings very safely, very close. Keep your handbag closed as you would expect to in any other place in the world. Generally a piece of advice about Addis Ababa is and Ethiopia in general is avoid random conversations with people who approach you on the street, and that applies for the minibuses as well. Whilst it may be pleasant to talk to Ethiopians, or to talk to anybody who approaches you, because it's nice to make new friends and find out new things about the place where you are. And Ethiopians generally are pretty friendly and often looking to practice their English. There is always the danger that you will run into a hustler, somebody who's trying to get something out of you. Somebody potentially may mug you. They may simply just lead you into some kind of situation where you may feel that you're being taken advantage of. They may be very friendly for a while, chatting with you about all sorts of personal things, perhaps even giving you travel advice. But then at the end, in quite a forceful manner, they will then demand money from you. This can be extremely unpleasant and is best avoided by simply just saying no, or just walking away. Avoid getting into situations with people that you don't know. That's a general piece of advice. Regarding the minibuses, they are incredibly cheap. Traveling on a minibus will cost, in British money, probably about 50 pence for a long distance, and 10 pence for a short distance. So incredibly little money, and they are by far the cheapest way to get around. They travel in all around the city, and you can pick them up at various different points. Some of the prominent ones are Piazza, and also Mercato, which is the main place for it's a huge marketplace, absolutely massive. Apparently it's Africa's biggest marketplace. The other way to travel is by Lada taxi. Basically, these are what in any other country would just be normal taxis, but they are Lada cars in general, which date back from the period of the communist era, when a lot of cars were imported from Russia. Um, the Lada taxis you have to negotiate in advance. They are insanely expensive compared to other means of transportation in the city. Um, Very convenient, obviously, but they could cost you anywhere up to £5 for a journey in the city, which is a lot of money in Addis Ababa. And so you must negotiate in advance. If you don't, again, a figure will simply be demanded of you, which could be considerably more than you would have been able to negotiate in the first place. And again, the drivers can be quite forceful in getting the money that they want. So I would definitely recommend against simply getting into a Lada taxi without negotiating the price. There are certain key words in Amharic which are very well worth learning. If you can prepare yourself in advance by learning as many of these kind of keywords as possible, it would help you a lot for your trip, because it shows that you are not totally fresh to the country and therefore people are less likely to take advantage of you. Um, Another thing to note about Lada taxis is they are pretty ancient and rusty. So if you're going on a long distance trip, the cost may be prohibitive, and quite frankly, that's definitely not the best choice for traveling. There are airport taxis which are yellow and green. These can be found at the airport, obviously, and also traveling around Addis on occasion. These are more expensive than the Lada taxis and generally to be avoided. There's no real reason to choose an airport taxi. Um, my recommendation is to use the minibus taxis, simply for cost. However, it is a crowded experience. The next method of transportation now this is are the little local buses, which are Chinese-built bendy buses, red, if I recollect correctly. They are very cheap, even cheaper than taking the mini buses. They may cost something like 5p or 10p, something like that. And generally comfortable, but again, overcrowding and pickpockets are to be avoided. In terms of long distance, there are also long distance buses which can be taken from places like the main square, and some of the companies are, for example, Salam Bus, which travels to Gondar, and Sky Bus, which travels to Awassa, both very interesting destinations in themselves. A price for a trip which is some 500 kilometers, for example, from Addis down to Awassa, could cost you as little as £8 sterling. And if you take the Sky Bus, it's very comfortable. Again, I would avoid any random conversations with people, Ethiopian people, and obviously just use common sense if you do engage in a conversation. If it seems to be going somewhere you're not comfortable with, then just simply break off the conversation, but probably better not to get involved in the first place. One always has to remember that Ethiopia is a very poor country, and you are perceived as a white person as being effectively a walking cash point. At the very least, you can help people. You can help people move out of the country, which is the desire of a great number of people. But in the short term, people can expect to get something out of you, and that may not be your intention of your trip. So I would advise against it. Trains at this time are not available, and I would certainly avoid cycling in Addis Ababa. It's a very busy city. So those are really the main means of transportation, and the key issue regarding transportation is simply don't get involved in conversations, as I've repeatedly stressed. Keep your belongings very closely with you. People I know were pickpocketed several times on the trip. And it's a very unpleasant experience, losing your things, but also having to deal with the insurance and having to deal with the police. A friend of mine who was pickpocketed ended up having to spend 4 days effectively in a police station by having to go back repeatedly until the right officers, English-speaking officers, were there. And so it's basically a waste of travel time, and very much to be avoided. Another thing to say is that you can travel long distance with the minibuses, but on the experience that I took, which was from Addis Ababa to Awassa, it was an extremely hair-raising experience, in that simply the little minibuses drive extremely fast, and the roads are very often populated by people with horse and carts, moving in the road randomly. You don't have traffic lights as such there, so it's sort of a free-for-all. And another thing to say is that on the main arteries, the main roads, you will find roadblocks. The roadblocks are not blocks as such, but they're simply police standing on the road, who will simply flag down any vehicles and will ask to see the driving license of the driver, or to see tickets of the people in the bus and so on. Supposedly they are to avoid overcrowding. I couldn't really say anything other than that, because I haven't witnessed personally any form of corruption or anything else. But I'm not aware why the roadblocks happen. But I could say at this stage that it's far better to take one of the big buses like Skybus, because they don't get stopped, and so you'll have a much smoother journey. So that's kind of the main summaries of transportation in Ethiopia. And if you need more information on transportation in Ethiopia, I would recommend getting into touch with the Ethiopian Tourist Board. The only other thing that wasn't covered is driving your own car, and again, I can't really say anything about that, as I didn't do that on my trip. Okay, so I wish you a safe journey, and I hope that you found this information on Ethiopia useful. Salam.